With the All-Star break here, here's a few pitchers I would drop and not keep on my fantasy team here after the All-Star break and going into it. The first guy, Nick Pivetta, the Boston Red Sox. So Pivetta, it's been a pretty decent year for him, but over the last few weeks, he's starting to get hit hard, and the division's taking a toll right now and has figured him out in the AL East. On the season, 108 innings, 8-7 record, a complete game, 97 hits, 54 runs, 34 walks, 104 strikeouts, and 10 quality starts for Pivetta with a 4.50 ERA and a 1.26 whip on the season. But over the last month here, 6.75 ERA and a 1.65 whip. And those numbers just aren't going to get the job done. So Pivetta, I know he's in a tough division, but right now there's no more waiting on him to turn things around, especially the last three outings. July 5th versus Tampa, 5 2/3. Got the loss, 8 hits, 7 runs, 2 walks, 4 Ks. July 10th versus the Yankees, 3 1/3. 8 hits, 6 runs, 2 walks, 5 Ks in that one. And July 16th at the Yankees, 4 1/3, got the loss. 7 hits, 7 runs, 3 walks, 4 Ks. So this East definitely taking a toll on Nick Pivetta. He's been hit hard over the last few weeks, giving up 20 earned runs in the last 3 ball games, and that's a disaster for fantasy owners. And right now I would drop him. He's been dropped in 7% of fantasy leagues, but still owned in 62%. No doubt about it, this break could give him help and get him back on the right track, because he's not going to verse the Yankees every other start or every start, but the Yankees have definitely had his number and destroyed his ERA and his fantasy value over the last few weeks. So right now, I would drop Pivetta. It's been tough sailing for him over the last 3 outings in the last month. And yeah, he could turn things around, but right now, after those last 3 outings, you don't want him on your fantasy team. The next guy is another guy in the AOE, Shane Bass, Tampa Bay Rays. So Bass, he's been one of the best prospects coming up through the Rays system over the last few seasons. But he's another guy that just can't stay healthy or stay on the field. And now he's officially on the 60-day DO with an elbow injury. And he still owns, surprisingly, 56% of fantasy leagues. But once the fantasy season gets back on track later in the week here, there's only 5-6 weeks of the regular season before fantasy playoffs start for most people playing head-to-head leagues. So Bass on the season, 27 innings, 1-2 record, 27 hits, 15 earned runs, 9 walks, 30 strikeouts, and 2 quality starts with a 5 ERA and a 1.33 whip. So Bass, he just hasn't stayed healthy. When this guy, we know he's had great upside and a top prospect, like I mentioned, coming out of the Rays system. So the last few games before he went down, June 28th, versus the Brewers, 5 2/3 in that one. 3 hits, a run, 2 walks, 6 Ks. July 3rd at Toronto, 6 innings, got the win. 7 hits, a run, 2 walks, 7 Ks. And then July 10th at a bad Cincinnati Red team, you just know the arm went in that one in the elbow. 2 1/3, got the loss. 8 hits, 7 runs, 2 Ks in that one. So Bass, he was a good for the few starts we've seen him this season. Coming up in June after he started the season injured, but now it looks like he's possibly out for the season. Maybe in keeper and dynasty leagues, if you want to keep him and you keep him as a low-round pick, that's fine. But in redraft leagues, there's no reason to hold on to him, because like I mentioned, at best he's going to come back in the later part of the season. They're not going to push him far, where he's going to go probably 3-4 innings at most, and there's no reason to keep Bass, especially he's on the 60-day DL. The next guy I look to drop this week's Trevor Rogers of the Miami Marlins. So Trevor Rogers last season was a great year for him, but this year he just can't get anything going with this Marlin team. 84 innings, 4-9 record, 91 hits, 51 earned runs, 39 walks, 78 strikeouts, and only 1 quality start on the season with a 5.46 ERA and a 1.55 whip. And over the last 2 weeks here, a 5.06 ERA and a 1.38 whip. So I know he plays in a tough division with good hitting teams like the Mets, Phillies, and the Atlanta Braves, obviously. But this guy, he just hasn't gotten anything going. And in fantasy points leagues, he's only had 1 double-digit fantasy game since June 9th here. So he's definitely struggling, is Trevor Rogers, in a tough division, not getting anything going, an ERA over 5. And it's still mind-boggling to me, he's still owned in 63% of fantasy leagues. July 6th versus the Angels, 4 2/3, got the loss. 4 hits, 3 runs, 2 walks, 5 Ks. July 11th versus Pittsburgh, 5 1/3, got the loss. 6 hits, 2 runs, 3 walks, 7 Ks. And July 17th versus the Phillies, 6 innings, got the loss. 4 runs, 4 Ks, 7 hits. So right here, he hasn't recorded a quality start either since May as Trevor Rogers. And he's just not getting the job done. I know last season he was great. I know he still has great upside, but right here, you don't want to wait all season for a guy to get going, especially if you're trying to win a championship in your fantasy league or you're fighting for the playoffs. And right now, Trevor Rogers just isn't the answer. And he's a pitcher I would drop this week with a high ERA and a tough division. I know he'll stay in the rotation most likely the whole season here for this Marlin team. But right now, he's not paying any dividends for fantasy owners. The next guy, Lyles of the Baltimore Orioles. So Lyles, it's been a mixed bag of results this season for him in the AL East. 6-8 record, 107 2/3, 119 hits, 57 runs, 34 walks, 91 Ks, 8 quality starts, a 4.76 ERA, and a 1.44 WHIP on the season. Lyles, and over the last 2 weeks, a 5.17 ERA and a 1.47 WHIP. So right here, it's in a tough division. I know this Baltimore Orioles team, they've surprised a lot of people this season, especially coming off a 10-game winning streak last week. And Lyles, he was pitching good for a few weeks span, but over the last outing really did him in, and he got destroyed. July 7th versus the Angels, 6 innings got the win. 5 hits, a run, 2 walks, 4 Ks, a quality start. July 12th at the Cubs, 7 innings got the win. 7 hits, 2 runs, a walk, 5 Ks in the quality start. And July 17th at Tampa, he got rocked 2 2/3, got the loss. 6 hits, 6 runs, 2 walks, 5 Ks. So Lyles, he was on a good stretch before that. 4 out of 5 games were quality starts. But he had very weak opponents. Minnesota, not a great hitting team. The Angels, they've free-fallen this season. And the Cubs, one of the worst teams in the league as well. So right here, versus Tampa Bay, they hit him hard. And his next outing possibly could be versus the Yankees as Lyles. So right now, while he struggled in his last outing and he's back to versing tough opponents, there's no way I could count on him in fantasy leagues here. And he's a guy who would drop this week. He had a nice few-game stretch versus the weaker teams like I mentioned, but playing in that East and with more competition towards the end of the season here in that division, he's a guy that I don't think is going to last or be good for fantasy baseball. And we could see a lot of similar outings like we did versus Tampa Bay the other night, where he got bombed. And the fifth and final pitcher I look to drop this week, Stetler of the Minnesota Twins. Smetler, he's had some good games and some bad games, but it's more bad games recently than good on the season. 62 1/3, 4-2 record, 59 hits, 28 earned runs, 17 walks, 37 strikeouts, and 6 quality starts with a 4.02 ERA and a 1.21 WHIP. But over the last 2 weeks here, that ERA's ballooned to a 12.79 ERA and a 2.84 WHIP. So right here, Smetler, the lefty pitcher we know, and the league's caught up to him. He came up early in the season. He was pitching good baseball, but now he's got bombed over the last 2 outings. July 9th at Texas, 3 1/3, no decision. 8 hits, 7 runs, 3 walks, 2 Ks in that one. And July 15th versus the White Sox, 3 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks, a K. So Smetzel got sent down the other day. Chris Archer came up in his place. But I think this Twin team, if they really want to compete and win that Central, go out there and make a deal before the August 2nd trade deadline. And I don't think Smetzel is a guy they could count on or a guy that should be in their rotation. So right here this week, I would drop Smetzel. And there's no reason to hold on to him. I could definitely see him come up later on in the season if there's an injury or if they don't make a trade at the deadline. But right now I would drop him. So that's a few pitchers I would drop here heading into the All-Star break for fantasy baseball.